In the eyes of many Americans, coyotes were a threat to agricultural and ranching interests. Thousands of them were slaughtered every year until scientists began to study them. They discovered that coyotes weren't the threat many believed, and that they played an important role in their ecosystem. This video will explore how those discoveries eventually led President Richard Nixon to ban poisoning predators on federal land. By the early 1900s, states realized that they couldn't control coyotes and turned towards the feds for help. The Bureau of Biological Survey was happy to assist. The Bureau's original goal was to catalog America's natural history, but in order to survive budget cuts, the survey looked for an economic reason for its existence. Predator control suited the Bureau perfectly. A scientist with the Bureau named Vernon Bailey argued public lands in the West were sanctuaries for coyotes. Bailey wanted the Bureau to destroy the animals, and they were brutally efficient. By the 1920s, they were killing about 35,000 coyotes per year. Eventually, some scientists began to study coyotes and realized how important they are to the environment. In 1887, a journalist from a small town in Utah called for an end to the slaughter of coyotes because the local rodent population had exploded. A naturalist named Enos A. Mills made similar observations in his 1909 book, Wildlife in the Rockies. It took time, but ecologists confirmed those observations and started to change the perception of coyotes. Instead of assuming coyotes were evil, they actually examined the coyote's diet and the role they played within an ecosystem. The research was revolutionary, and what they discovered would eventually change federal policy. Adolph Murray, a biologist with the National Park Service, explored the coyote's niche in his 1940 study, Ecology of the Coyote in the Yellowstone. He discovered that a coyote's diet consisted mostly of small mammals, birds, and a variety of smaller prey. Coyotes simply didn't eat many large mammals. The journalist Mills and Murray realized that coyotes were valuable to humans as pest control. Murray's study, along with many others, proved that the historical arguments against coyotes were wrong. Scientist authors like Rachel Carson and Aldo Leopold helped some Americans to rethink their view of the natural world. Jim Williams, a wildlife biologist and writer, credited, quote, an environmental ethos driven by the science of ecology for helping the public understand their environment. Protecting animals, including predators, became very important for some Americans. Historian Dan Flores explained growing up in the era of environmentalism like this, quote, like so many millions of others, I became someone different then, transformed by my experience, and I suppose open to transformation. And through what seemed yet another inexplicable turn in the coyote story, the period provided many of us with a new, very 20th century experience with the animal, that ambiguous yet endlessly intriguing canine that stood as such an emblem of wild America, unquote. By 1971, even Sports Illustrated published a story in support of coyotes. In 1972, the environmental movement drove President Nixon to protect coyotes and other predators on federal land by banning poison. In his address, the president discredited America's historic hatred of coyotes by stating that, quote, the old notion that only the good predator is a dead one is no longer acceptable, as we understand that even the animals and birds which sometimes prey on domesticated animals have their own value in maintaining the balance of nature, unquote. Nixon was indirectly crediting scientists with changing America's perceptions of predators. Without those same scientists, the environmental movement wouldn't have been able to force Nixon to ban poisoning. The 1972 ban illustrates how America's perception of the coyote had evolved. They transitioned from being a satanic beast to being accepted as part of the American landscape in just 100 years. The next chapter in their story will be dedicated by how we learn to live with them, not how we can kill them.